Hello, and welcome back to the world of Wysteria. We will now continue with part 2 of chapter 32. And I will begin with the last line of part 1. "It seems you may have yet another talent," said Jeremy, handing the watch back to him. "And a very uncommon one." "That's what I told him," said Emily. "It doesn't seem particularly useful, though," Will remarked. "After all, anything can be created here. Don't get me wrong, I love antiques, and I understand that having a replica, no matter how accurate, isn't the same. But, strictly speaking, aren't these artifacts just reproductions anyway?" Jeremy picked up his pipe, which had gone cold, and eyed it thoughtfully. "A reproduction. Yes, I suppose you could call it that," he said. "A recreation, perhaps. More than a mere copy, though. So, aside from the emotional satisfaction of owning a relic," said Will, "is there any practical difference?" Jeremy continued to stare at the pipe. Then, after a few moments of unresponsive silence, he placed it back on the table and glanced around the room. "Those books," he said, looking past Will at a set of shelves built into the wall behind him. "Have you read them?" Will glanced over his shoulder. "I'm not sure," he replied. "I've never looked at the titles. They were just here, part of the decor." Jeremy got up from his chair and walked over to the shelves. He selected one of the volumes, opened it, and began perusing the pages. "Yes, very interesting," he muttered to himself. Apparently, their discussion of artifacts was finished. Will looked at Emily, who sent him a look of sympathy. Jeremy then returned to his chair, sat down, and handed Will the open book. "Read this," he said. As Will looked down at the page and began reading, he quickly realized that the string of words printed on the paper formed sentences that, though grammatically correct, were meaningless or, at best, rambling. He flipped to another page and saw the same thing. "It's nonsense," he said. "Yes," said Jeremy. "That is the difference." Will didn't understand the point he was trying to make. Difference? "This is a creation," Jeremy explained. "As such, it contains nothing, no information, independent of its creator. If it were an artifact, however, it would be an accurate recreation of the original book." "I see," said Will. That was a significant difference. "Then I can understand why books would be valuable. But what about other objects? This crossbow, for example. What information does it have? What makes it different from the one I might create here?" "The difference is the same," he said. "Unlike everything here around you, its existence is independent of your intentions." "What does that mean in practical terms?" Jeremy continued, restating Will's question. "You could smash it or burn it, but you cannot alter it or make it vanish completely. You were able to alter the air through which the quarrels flew, but you could not have changed the substance of the projectiles themselves, as you changed the weight of the rock Emily threw across the ravine. In addition, he said, because artifacts have a reality that transcends the particular world in which they reside, they behave differently. For instance, if you created a sword here and cut yourself with it, you would feel the pain, and it might linger with you in the dream universe. But a wound from an artifact would be felt more acutely and for a much longer time. It might even be felt by your body in the waking world, though not as severely. Aside from being more dangerous, these weapons are also more useful, for their independent existence allows these objects to be transported between worlds, whereas that book, for instance, can only exist here. Will thought of the time Jeremy had left his pipe in the room. So, I could take my watch to your world and leave it there, or give it to Emily and she could take it with her? Yes, in theory, Jeremy replied. Except that I don't have that ability, Emily interjected. Charlotte could do it, though. Those who have that particular talent, couriers they are often called, can transport relics from world to world, Jeremy explained, whether or not the object is something they brought from the waking world. You could certainly bring your watch to my world, but that doesn't necessarily mean you would be able to bring the crossbow. Why is that? Will asked. Generally speaking, only things that are closely associated with the body accompany a dreamer, he said. Clothing is the obvious example, for most people see their clothes as an extension of their bodies. If you were to ask someone to draw a self-portrait, he would most likely draw himself clothed, not just out of modesty, but because that is an essential part of his self-image. Personal items such as wedding rings or religious jewelry, things that someone may always wear, even when bathing, will sometimes accompany a person as well. But they will vanish from this universe, like the body, when the mind leaves. Your pocket watch falls into a slightly different category. It is not an extension of your body, yet you do have a personal connection, an emotional tie to the object. Transporting an item to which one has no significant connection, such as this crossbow, is another matter. These men and women who attacked you were not run-of-the-mill thugs. They were quite a talented bunch. Charlotte told us she'd heard rumors about professionals being sought, said Emily. Nothing that tied it to Nathan, no. I, too, heard these rumblings, Jeremy replied. And through my sources, I learned that one of Nathan's longtime cronies, a man named Clarence, had been spotted in various worlds where these inquiries were being made. Could he be the one who led the raid, the drifter we took prisoner? Will asked. Jeremy told him that he had, in fact, run across this Clarence. He asked for a description of their hostage, which Will then gave him. Yes, said Jeremy, it appears to be him. It would certainly make sense. Nathan must have used a significant amount of capital to assemble this crew. And given the outcome, I imagine it would be difficult to find individuals willing to get involved in another assault, at any price. We were hoping the story wouldn't get out, said Will. It may not, he replied. But with so many people involved, someone is bound to speak of it. Do you think Eris has heard about the incident? Emily asked him. I'm certain she has, he answered. In fact, it's likely she knew about the attack before it happened. I doubt that Nathan would have attempted such a bold move without her knowledge, if not her blessing. As to how she may react, who knows? She will do what she does, and we will respond accordingly. And in the meantime, we will not concern ourselves with her. Jeremy then picked up his pipe, rose to his feet, and walked out onto the balcony. And that concludes chapter 32. And we will return with chapter 33.